What's up, guys? I know I look kind of like tired or whatever, but it's really nice out and I'm just chilling and looking through my phone on Twitter, and I noticed people on Twitter complaining, 20-something year olds on Twitter complaining about how terrible it is in this country, inflation, and how it's impossible to buy a house. And not only that, and how they're angry at corporations and the Fed and these big companies for causing inflation to make it hard for them to buy a house. So what I have to say about that is, first of all, it's not hard to buy a house. It's very easy to buy a house. And actually, if you have a job, it's extremely easy to buy a house. But even if you don't have a job, it's possible to buy a house. And the funny thing is that these people that I saw online, like on Twitter, complaining about it, they have jobs. I know that they have jobs. They have full-time jobs that pay way more than any job that I ever had. And, you know, I was still able to get 2 mortgages. You know, it's really easy to get a mortgage in this country. It's really easy to buy a house. It's much easier than any country. I promise you, it's much easier than anywhere else. You know, if your credit score is above my credit score, which was 640, you'll have it easier than me. You'll have an easier time getting a loan than I did. If you have had a job for more than 6 months at a time, you'll have it easier than me. If you have more than $5,000 or $10,000 in your bank account, you'll have it easier than me. And I know a lot of people haven't saved up that much, but there are so many factors that will make it so that you will have it easier than me to buy a house. And seeing these people with these big jobs that they've been in for so long, complaining about how hard it's to find. The only thing that I could think of that why these people think it's so impossible to buy a house in this country is that they live in coastal cities and they insist on staying in these rich, expensive coastal neighborhoods where homes are through the roof expensive. If you're gonna stay in DuPont, Washington, D.C., where I live, it's gonna be impossible to buy a house. And that's why I didn't stay there. And it took me a while to realize that, but when you realize that, you better get out of there. There's so many cheap places in this country. Literally, go on Zillow, pick a place, move there, buy a house, extremely cheap, something that you can afford, and then you'll have a house. And I just think most people aren't willing to do that, and that's why they'd rather just sit and complain about how it's impossible to buy a house in this country. You're no, but I want to buy a house in this area where my family is, where these corporations are, where my job is. If you're gonna insist on living in this place where all these people are, it's not free. Nothing is free. Nobody is, you're well, I can't have a house. It's you can't just have a house. Everything comes at a cost. If things didn't come at a cost, it would mean that you are entitled to slaves building you a house for free. Slaves and free shit. You're not entitled to that. You're not entitled to slaves coming and building you a house for free. You're not entitled to that. If you have a certain budget and you have a certain availability, you're gonna have to work with that. And there's plenty of places in this country, more than any other country, plenty of opportunity, and interest rates are lower than any other country. It's cheaper than any other country. I have family members that tried buying a house in Israel recently. It takes months, years sometimes, to secure a single loan, to close in on a loan. And they have to put 50% down. Their interest rates are insanely high, and their taxes are ginormous. I remember my sister, when I bought a car, my sister was asking me, so what was the vehicle tax that you had to pay on that car? I paid $4,800 for the car. She's like, oh, so you paid that much for tax? And I'm like, no, what do you mean? My sister, who was living in Israel, they had to pay 100% taxes on their cars. Their mortgage taxes, their property taxes, also ridiculously insane. I don't remember the exact number, but it's a lot higher than here. Their income taxes, a lot higher than here. And that's just Israel, there's so many other countries. you know, and I've been looking into so many countries recently where I've been thinking of buying a house. Really, it's still the easiest here at home in the United States, and it's also the cheapest. And it's so crazy to me that like people are going out there and complaining about how like, fuck, you know, fuck these corporations, and they're making it so hard for us to have a house. We can't even exist. You can exist. You can be homeless and go exist on the beach. You can exist wherever you want, but like most people, especially young people, are not willing to move. Like the only reason why I've gotten to this stage is because I was willing to move. I picked up my ass and moved somewhere cheaper, somewhere where I can afford to buy a house. And there's plenty of places where you can afford to buy a house. You're just not willing to move there because you're scared. And people will be like, oh, you know, if I bought the house in Beverly Hills years ago when it cost a fraction of the amount, then I would be a millionaire. Well, you didn't. You weren't willing to do it because years ago, Beverly Hills wasn't, you know, and Beverly Hills is not a good example because it's been fancy for a long time, but like, you know, that fancy neighborhood that you think that you are entitled to live in, you would not want to have lived there many years ago when it started being, you know, before it was fancy, because you're not a risk taker. You're not someone who is willing to put aside a little bit of comfort in order to get this thing that you say that you really want. You don't really want it. If you really wanted it, you would be willing to move somewhere before it's a fancy place. You'd be willing to bet on a place before it became fancy. You'd be willing to move to Highland Park before it was Highland Park, before it was a fancy place. You know, all these like really, really rich real estate investors that you see, there's so many of them, people that became rich off of real estate. They bought land in a place that nobody cared about. You've got to be willing to do something that nobody else is willing to do. And in real estate, it's the same exact thing. You do something that nobody else is willing to do. And then everybody in retrospect is like, I should have bought in that place. Well, you didn't. You didn't, because you're not a risk taker. So if you're in your 20s and you want to be making it anywhere in life, you've got to be willing to take risks. Get out of your bubble. Stop like trying to live in this like, you know, the same place where you've been, your family and everybody is. Like, stop. Your family will be there. You'll be able to go visit your family. You'll be fine. But if you really want to buy a house, this is the way that you're saying that you want to, move. You know, like there's places in Arkansas, there's homes, beautiful homes that you can buy for like less than $100,000, less than $50,000 sometimes. You know, fixer-uppers. You can get a fixer-upper, work on it, learn how to paint walls. I don't know. The plumbing and electricity part, you're probably gonna have to hire people, but like, learn as much as you can about the other stuff. And if you're willing to do that, everything else is easy peasy. Like getting a loan, easy peasy. If you have a job, like don't even complain if you have a job. If you had a job for the past 2 years, don't even complain. It's easy peasy. And I know I keep saying it's easy peasy, and I'm not like telling you all the details, and I try to give as many details as I can. You know, like on Twitter, if you follow me on Twitter, I basically laid out everything. I laid out my job history. I laid out all the stuff that I did, like, but it's really hard to say in 280 characters. And what I'm hoping to do is really go into detail and write it out for you guys and make videos for you guys, really putting into detail like how you can do it, how you can basically do it, even if you don't have a job, even if you don't have anything, no money, no place to live, even if you don't have food to eat, like, you can do it. And I'll lay it out for you in the easiest, simplest way that I can, and I can tell you about my mistakes too, which I probably have said like a bunch of times, and I'm still making a million mistakes, so it's really just like learning as I go. But anyway, I hope this was helpful, and I'm so hot and bothered by the sun. It's like so hot, so I'm gonna go inside now, and this phone will hopefully cool off. And I hope you liked this video. Okay, I really appreciate you guys for watching, and like I appreciate the comments. And also, like, I didn't have this mindset always. Like, I don't want to be like, oh yeah, like I know that, you know, I'm better than everybody. Like, I don't think the way that they do. I don't think that it's so hard, but I do think it's hard, and I have panic attacks all the time. I'm still learning so much, but I know that at this point in since I've seen it, like I've seen how possible it is and how easy it is compared to what I expected, I'm realizing that a lot of what I'm saying, like, oh, it's hard, it's not really hard, it's just scary. That's what it is. It's scary. Once you get over the fear, once someone tells you, like, no, it's not scary, no, it's not hard, yes, you can do it, the rest of it is actually pretty easy. It's going to be a lot easier than you expect. I promise you, it's a lot easier than you expected. And for me, definitely, like, looking back, a lot of the hardness, the hardship was actually just fear. Just me being scared of the unknown, because I didn't know that it was possible, and now I know it's possible. And the more I go along, the more I'm realizing how much more is possible. A lot more is possible. It is really, really easy to make money in this country. And hopefully I can give as many tools to you guys as I possibly can, because I want the people who follow me to be rich and successful and happy for life. And hey, see you guys later. Bye.